Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. It is Tuesday night, so this is our Tuesday night live show, affectionately referred to as After Dark. And as promised, just like I mentioned in our video, if you happen to watch it today, because we always like to under promise and overproduce, that's right. We have Lori Hellis here. So let's go ahead and bring her into the conversation. Good evening, Lori. How are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
I am doing better than I deserve. I assure you of that. So, why don't I know a lot of people that are joining us know who you are. We've talked about you. I think I've referred to you as my hero. But why don't you give me kind of a quick bio for everyone out there so they know who you are and what you do and why you bring some credibility to the whole situation with trying to get access to the court files in the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell matter. Take it away.
Sure. Well, I practiced law for 27 years. I'm a retired criminal attorney. Did both prosecution and defense, definitely preferred defense. So I retired to write and decided that I was going to write a book about the Vallow and Daybell case. So I'm under contract to write a book and just waiting for the trial to happen so I can finish that. In the meantime, I started a newsletter because I felt like there were a lot of people who had a lot of questions about the legal parts of things. So the newsletter sort of focuses on that, although my book won't focus just on the legal. And so I used to appear pretty frequently with on a friend's YouTube channel covering true crime. And now I've started my own channel. So last Friday was my first live, and I'll be doing those every Friday.
Great. More competition. No, I think it's great. So why don't you give us a plug as to your new channel? What do they have to search to find it?
The name of the channel is the name of my book, Children of Darkness and Light, which refers to the dark light scale that Chad Daybell used to decide that Tylee and JJ were dark spirits. So Children of Darkness and Light, and it's on Fridays at 6 Mountain Time.
Okay, well, perfect. And yeah, so everyone should go there, and I will ask Frank to put a link in the bio down below or whatever we call it.
Thanks.
It's already there, apparently. Frank's already put it there. So everyone should go do that. I urge everybody to go do that. And not that I have any bias towards lawyers, but I think that it's good to have somebody that really knows the legal jargon, so to speak, explain it. Just because, not that people can't learn it and don't know it, but until you've done it like 150 times, you don't really know what to expect, in my humble opinion. So
I think that's right. It's kind of like a different language.
Yeah, and you're a great source of information, so I appreciate it. So hopefully everyone that's watching tonight and then everyone watches the video will go check it out. All right, let's get to the brass tacks of what is going on there in Idaho. All right, so we know that a lot of court filings have been suppressed, and I mean suppressed in the way that are not available to the public. We also know that apparently they have more in-chamber conferences in this particular case than I have probably ever done in my entire life. I mean, other than maybe going back in chambers sometimes to do jury instructions, and that was in an old courthouse where it was just easier, but there was always a court reporter there. I've never seen a case where there's been so many items that have been sealed and everything's done behind closed doors, all under the guise of it could prevent a fair trial. Please, since you're there, let's start there. What the heck is going on there? And how do they do this? How do they get around being open to the public, a fair and public trial? You know, that whole Sixth Amendment stuff, right to a public trial?
Well, let me start by saying Rexburg, Madison and Fremont County are side by side. Rexburg is a very small community, and St. Anthony, where the Fremont County Courthouse is, would qualify as tiny. So it's a very insular kind of community. Culturally, they are about 96% members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they're all Mormon. And so that has its own cultural vibe to it as well. So then you layer on top of that the fact that the judge in the case was only appointed, excuse me, to the district court. He had been a municipal court judge. He was only appointed to the district court in late 2019, and then COVID hit and shut everything down. So his experience on the bench is pretty limited with complex cases. And this, of course, is his first death penalty case. It also is the first death penalty case for both district attorneys, as well as Chad's attorney, John Pryor. So there's a lot of inexperience going on. So I think that contributed to the judge's decisions. And then I think there's a bit of small town good old boyism going on. So my understanding, and this was information that was given to me and then confirmed by some folks close to the case. My understanding is that early in the case, the prosecutors, the judge, some of the law enforcement people were all part of a county employee Facebook group. And at some point, they made some comments about the case. And we all know that in and of itself probably wouldn't have been fatal had they just stepped back, said, this was not the proper way to do things, our mistake. We now have policies in place. That's all been scrubbed. And we've counseled all of our folks that that's not acceptable behavior. I think that probably would have been enough to deal with the issue.
Let me ask you a question. Let me interrupt you.
Sure.
Do you know the name of this Facebook group?
I don't. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I don't right off the top of my head.
Okay.
So the person who discovered it called it to the attention of both the prosecution and the defense. And when the defense got a hold of it, you might remember that Lori's first attorney, Mark Means, was jumping up and down and filing all kinds of odd motions. And it appears that he was right, that there was something untoward going on, but he was not experienced enough to be able to deal with it in the proper way. Mm-hmm. So, but my understanding is that there have been filings questioning the level of bias with the prosecution and with the grand jury as well. And all of those motions have been sealed.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So, I mean, we got so much to talk about. I'm going to try to, I mean, seriously, there's so much. So Mark Means, the original attorney for Lori Vallow, he was crazy, right? I mean, not crazy, but it seemed like his inexperience was getting the best of him. And he didn't know exactly which way to go with it, probably just from inexperience of not doing criminal work, but he thought something was wrong. And one of the motions I recall, they got the bar involved to, sanction them. They did an investigation. They said, no harm, no foul, nothing there. And frankly, I agree with it based upon what I knew. But if, the prosecution people or people that work there, like you said, I mean, they can have their opinions. I mean, we've all seen it where somebody from a police department says something inappropriate and they get fired. Like you said, what is so terrible about that? I mean, it's not going to like affect Robert Wood's election or anything like that, is it? In Rexburg?
I would doubt it, but
I'd probably get a few votes out of it. If you didn't get already 99%.
But But I think the more troubling thing is the lengths to which they've gone to cover it up. And
Why would they do that?
because it's a small town and they all protect one another.
Yeah. So obviously, John Pryor filed motions regarding these issues, the grand jury issues, etc.
Right.
He asked for permission to appeal, i.e., an interlocutory appeal on a couple of issues, and I think Judge Boyce granted him the right to do that on a couple of motions that were kind of sealed, I guess. I can't find anything. Is there? I mean, the Court of Appeals can't be sealed as well either, can it?
I don't think he's filed them yet.
Okay.
I don't think he's filed them with the Court of Appeals yet. So I think that may be why they can't be found yet.
Okay. I'm no, like I said, I try not to do appellate work. I have a guy in my office that does it. He's great at it. But there's timelines. And it seems like, is it just me, or there are no real solid timelines on anything in this case?
No, and actually that was discussed at the last hearing, that both sides asked the judge to set some clear timelines and some clear deadlines for motions. So,
I mean, you practiced law for 27 years. When you got to arraignment, the judge said, how much time do you need for motion? Well, give me 30 days, Your Honor. And you met that guideline. Right. And if you don't meet it, you have to ask for leave or permission to file outside of that. And you better have some good reason for that. But I've never seen anything so piecemeal in my life.
Yeah, it's been pretty disorganized. So both sides actually pointed out to the judge that they would like to have motion deadlines. So we'll see whether he sets them or not.
Well, speaking of motions deadlines, you filed a couple of motions with the court. And we've talked about it here where you filed a motion. And I think it's interesting that, you are an interested party, even though you try to intervene. No such thing exists in the criminal code, unless, of course, you're the official press from one of the newspapers. Then you can be an intervener when it's convenient. But if you're Lori Hellis, who's trying to get access and saying, Judge, you didn't do it right, you have no standing. And he nitpicked everything he could to delay your filings.
That's right.
But ultimately, what did you file and what took place at the hearing on October 13th, I think?
So ultimately, I filed motions as a third party, as a non-party movement, I think is what they made me call myself. And
Lori Hellis, the non-movement
party. Non-party movement, yes. So I filed those, and it was interesting that they set the hearing out at least a month, which I thought was kind of interesting because they've always been pretty quick to set hearings on motions. But
something important that could affect the trial,
right?
They like that.
Yeah. So I went in front of Judge Boyce, and he was pretty defensive. He was. It was interesting. He held up a piece of paper and said, back on January of 2020, here's an order that I filed, and it has findings in it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to argue with you that you did it once, right? I seem to recall that might have been the case, but what about the other 25 or more that are in the court record that you didn't bother with?
Yeah.
So one of the things that is most fascinating to me is you asked about these meetings in chambers, and they kept going back into chambers because John Pryor would say, I have a matter for the court that falls under the court's order. And at first I thought, what in the heck is he talking about?
What order?
There's a secret gag order. There's a gag order in that case that keeps the parties and their lawyers from talking about the case, and it's sealed.
Well, did the court do that on its own
Why?
motion, or did the prosecution
Don't
file it?
know, because everything's sealed. I can't tell. I can't tell who asked for it to be sealed. I have no idea. But have you ever heard of a sealed gag order before?
No. And I can
Well,
I can think of only, because normally lawyers are prohibited from going out to the press and
sure.
saying things that could affect the trial, so to speak. You know, if you got to be very careful about it. And I remember in one case that I had where the prosecution wanted a gag order, and I was like, okay, because it was not a case that we were going to try in the press. That never works well for the defense at all.
No.
So I was like, okay, judge, I'm fine with it because I'm not going to be talking to anybody. But for a court to say that, you know, there's a gag order, and I would love to see what can and can't be discussed in open public that's ultimately going to come out of trial. What are we going to do? Have the trial, you know, back and forth, back and forth? I mean, this is absurd. I've never seen anything like it.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
And normally, you know, we're talking about a death penalty case, and the judge made a comment, I think, in one of his orders. I think it was the motion regarding no cameras in the courtroom. He said, well, it's a death penalty case, and rarely do the prosecution and the defense agree on anything. But in this case, they all agree. No cameras in the courtroom. And my first thought is, exactly, why is everybody agreeing? It is a death penalty case. I do not get it. I do not understand it. The case is going to get moved up to Ada County in Idaho, which is basically Boise,
Right.
much larger population. I'm sure everybody's heard about this, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. I am certain they're going to be able to find 12 jurors, plus probably 6 or 7 alternates who don't care about this, or maybe have never heard any facts at all.
Mhm.
So I just don't understand, what is their big deal about it?
I honestly don't know. Um, I mean, the issues about her mental health clearly fall within the exception to the statute and should be sealed.
I get that.
But
That's medical stuff. But
sure.
when the defense is raising it, saying you're going to hear about a mental defense, mental health defense, at that
Yeah,
point,
it's
you're
going to be
kind of
waived
saying
anyway.
it's coming out anyway.
Right. Right. So I don't think we really, I mean, we don't really know. I do know that when they go back in chambers, they do take the court reporter. So those sessions in chambers are recorded, and the judge can't keep them sealed forever. They're going to come out once the trial's done. So I don't know what the purpose is in closing everything. I did think it was interesting that the very last order that he put out, having to do with the temporary stay for Lori, was like textbook form of how you're supposed to write an order. And it outlined the facts, and any part of it that appeared sensitive was blacked out and redacted. And it let the press and the public know that her attorney had filed a affidavit about her competency.
Yeah.
That the judge had called a quick meeting to order them to give that information to the prosecutor. They had a hearing in which they agreed that she was going to be reevaluated, and the case was going to be stayed until then. It was a perfect order. So, my position to the court was, well, you obviously have conceded that I was right, because you did it differently this time. You did it right now. All that other stuff you did wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm assuming the court's going to go back and amend their orders that he's previously done. It's just going to be, do you think you're going to get access to all that? He's going to say, you know what, I messed up, and therefore it's all going to be released to you, Miss Hellis? Or do you think he's going to go back and amend his orders to make them compliant with the statute?
Well, I think that's going to depend on how closely the media committee of the Idaho Supreme Court is looking at this.
Okay.
After I had tried to file these motions several times and gotten nowhere, my research turned up the fact that there is a committee. The Supreme Court, Idaho Supreme Court, has a committee, and their job is to mediate disagreements between the press and the bench. I don't know whether that committee still exists or not, because the entry on the website was old. But I wrote a letter to them. I called to begin with and said, how do you get something? Yeah. How do you get something in front of this committee? Well, we don't know, and we'll put you into, and they kept giving me the runaround. So finally, I just wrote the letter to the judge, who is the chair of the media committee. And
where did he used to sit on the bench before he went to the Supreme Court?
He held the position that Judge Boyce now holds.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And has anybody responded from the committee at all? Or
nobody?
It's just linger. It's one of those committees that they set up. It looks good on paper. Yeah. And once a year they meet so they can say that they've met. They've had a couple of minutes that they met, conferred, and approved the orders from the last meeting. Right. And then they go have their little cocktail party and sit around and say how great they how great they are. Correct.
or the meeting lasts long enough that the Supreme Court has to order lunch in for them so they get a free lunch. Yeah.
Exactly. I know, it's just so what's your gut feeling? I mean, I practice criminal defense as long as you have. I can usually read the tea leaves when it comes to how the judge is going to rule. What do you think the judge is going to do?
I think you're right. I think he's going to unseal enough to sort of make a token effort at it. And then he's going to revise the rest of his orders to comply with the law, and we'll get nothing. But at least people know that this is an issue.
Yeah.
And at least I've asked for it.
Yeah. So I've been to Rexburg. I haven't been up to St. Mary's. And I think I've described it as it's literally if you were to drop central casting from a movie set for like perfect middle America, where people don't lock their doors, kids are out riding their bikes, and all the store owners are waving at the kids. Hey, little Johnny. That's the way it was.
Right.
And like I said, I only spent the day there, but people were very nice. It wasn't anything weird or unusual. Clearly, there's a big Mormon temple up on the top of the hill. I think with the university or somehow associated there with they have a BYU branch, I guess. There, I think I'm correct on that.
Yes.
But it's kind of like Salt Lake City, where you go there and you're like, the first thing that jumps out at you is, my, how clean it is. Mm-hmm. There's no trash, no dirt.
Right.
Spotless.
No homeless people. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess my question is people keep talking about the Mormon Church in this. What motivation, if does the Mormon Church have about any of this? Because my understanding was they usually don't like those fringe groups because, frankly, they make them all look bad. So why not just launch these two, throw them under the bus, figuratively, and let the chips fall where they may and say, we're not associated with these people.
Well, I think in a lot of ways the church has, but I think it's important. I think it's important to distinguish between the church writ large, that monolithic political body with its headquarters in Salt Lake, from LDS church culture. So you have people who have cradle to grave grown up within the structure of and the doctrine of the church. And the church itself tends to be quite patriarchal, quite secretive. They're an organization that has secret rituals and things that are considered too holy to talk about. And so you have people who have been raised in that culture, regardless of whether the church as an institution is saying, we don't want anything to do with these people. They are pariahs. They don't espouse our doctrine. The people who are involved in the case still live within that culture. And so it is a secretive, protective kind of culture. And I think that's where people make the mistake of saying, well, the church is involved. It really isn't. The church, in fact, has done everything they can to distance themselves from this case.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to someone who is a longtime church member and was told at one time one of the very important church elders came from Salt Lake and to talk to their congregation. And this person said, wow, I bet they've come to talk about this case and the impact that it's having on the church and on the community. And when the church elder got there, not a word was said about it. The church elder was there for a completely different reason, and not a word was ever said about it. The church has actually never acknowledged anything to do with either one of these folks. And even sadder, 3 of the people who are dead in this case were faithful members of the church, and their name has never been uttered by the church. And that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is. And I mean, I know a lot of people are always like, oh, the church is manipulating this and manipulating that. But like you said, it's more of kind of an unspoken type of situation here. So do we know, or were you able to glean any more information as to the mental health issues that obviously have caused concern, that caused Mr. Archibald to file a motion to say, Judge, I'm concerned about competency. I want to reevaluate it. Were you able to glean anything from that, from the court proceedings, or is that all hidden once again in the chambers, or even through conversations with people, outside?
Yes, it's all happening in chambers. So none of that was public other than the documents. You've practiced law as long as I have, and you know what it's like to deal with clients and the issue of competency. Competency can be a moving target, and it can be a small thing can trigger them, and sometimes it's something as simple as their meds quit working, or they need to be adjusted, or psychotropic medicine is kind of like voodoo. It's a lot of trial and error. So it's hard to say why she suddenly decompensated. I suspect that John Pryor's motion, his motion to sever the case, probably, and the suggestion that part of his defense was going to be Chad was an innocent bystander while Lori and Alex did it together, and he was set up. I suspect that suggestion probably didn't play very well with her. Remember, everything we know is that she still thinks they are the goddess and the chosen one, and they are exalted beings, and they are going straight to the celestial kingdom once their important work down here is done. And LDS doctrine is very heavy into families continuing to be sealed to one another once they're in heaven. So marriages go on in heaven. And so her it wasn't a surprise to see her show up in court 2 hearings ago with a hair tie on in place of a wedding ring. As far as she's concerned, she is still absolutely all in on Chad. And so I can't imagine that went down too well when her attorney went over those motions with her, and it's very clear their defense is going to be some other dude did it.
Yeah.
The Saudi defense.
I got somebody who's like, I don't like the way you say you called it, but I called it. You knew. We talked about this long ago. There's not a whole lot of defense out there for Chad,
No.
other than it wasn't me. I didn't know.
Right.
Sure, this lady, she was nice. She kind of, rocked my world. But next thing you know, man, everybody keeps dying around her. I'm kind of playing it cool. Had no idea what's going on. Maybe he knows something afterwards, which,
Right.
accessory is a lot different than, being complicit in it.
And conspiracy, sure.
And then the next thing you know, my wife's getting shot at, and then ultimately she dies. And then Alex dies. All these coincidences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just keeps coming. But
so I don't know about your listeners, but I've had a lot of people ask me, why aren't they going to divorce? Who's going to file for divorce? Now, Idaho is interesting because the marital privilege does not apply if it involves the injury or death of one of the partner's children.
Yeah.
But it does apply when it has to do with Tammy's death. So it will apply in if there was any conspiracy going on in regards to Tammy's death. So I don't think anybody's in a really big hurry to get divorced.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I don't think Mr. Pryor put that in any of his motions, something to the, I don't recall anybody asserting any privileges at that point.
Not yet.
Not yet. But once again, these are all the types of things that if we were able to actually see the motions,
right,
you and I, somebody kind of read between the lines, you can figure out it's not like we have any special knowledge, I guess, so to speak, but just a little more experience. And you can say, this is what I think is going to take place. Just from the motions that we have or orders that we have been given, it's just like, oh my gosh, I knew something was going on. I knew it. And I just don't get it. I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think somebody, Mr. Pryor should be filing motions saying, I want to revisit this protection order, Judge, because it's violating my client's right to a fair trial and things done in secrecy and not in a public courtroom. My experience is, I've seen it occasionally, like in juvenile cases where they kick everybody out of the courtroom. But for the most part, I don't care what's going on. You could be talking about the most heinous crime, the most embarrassing set of facts in the world. And I don't care if you're talking in a divorce court or whatever.
Right.
Anybody could diddy bop into that courtroom, have a seat, and sit there and listen to, the people's most private and most intimate things that are at issue. And nobody can say, would you please leave? That would be a violation. That would be a violation of the Sixth Amendment and the client's right to do that. And I just don't understand why people aren't, what's the word I'm looking for?
Outraged. Yeah, I don't know.
So to speak, and not making objections to it.
Right. Scott, in my experience, the only time that that documents or court proceedings were sealed was in the case where you had a child witness, say in a sex abuse case, and you wanted to protect the child witness or you wanted to protect the identity of a child witness. those are the only circumstances that I can recall in my career
And
having documents sealed.
yeah, and maybe in a juvenile matter, but even if you do a trial where the child is a victim, they got to come to court. I still get to sit on, they still get to sit on the stand and cross-examine them. Maybe now they get to have the emotional support dog underneath the stand for them, but they still got to, get cross-examined. And so I just don't get what the secrecy is here. I mean, and if somebody on one side of the defense would start objecting to it, I just don't understand. I mean, I would think if Mr. Archibald's going to run a mental health defense, start planting that seed that she is not competent. She cannot form the requisite mental intent, i.e. knowingly do something, right?
Right.
You knew what you were doing. You were aware of your consequences. If you don't appreciate and understand the consequences, not like, oh, I didn't think I was going to get in that much trouble, but you really think that you're this princess goddess, right? You think you'd start planting that out there to somebody, maybe get some sympathetic juror. Oh, she's got a mental health issue. Look what happened down there in the Nicholas Cruz case, right? One juror. Oh, I just think he's got some mental health issues. Sorry about that, everybody. And whatever your position is on the death penalty, you just think, you can't go out there and do anything unethical, but you can start through the filings, get that information out to help your defense.
Sure.
You would think Mr. Pryor would start saying, hey, my guy didn't do it. Lori Vallow did it. We know from the motion. And it was interesting. You would think that motion for severance, I mean, throws Lori Vallow under the bus, gives his defense. Why is that one not sealed to the extent that, because it's going to affect somebody's right to a fair trial? That's what I'm saying. Rulings seem arbitrary and capricious, but you can't really definitively say that because we don't know what's in that gag order that somebody agreed to or was ordered to come. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know when the gag order was entered. I don't know on whose motion. There's no way to know. And I mean, I think it's getting in the way of them being able to prosecute the case. I think it's getting in the way of them being the defense attorneys being able to bring a defense. But we'll see. Yet another issue for appeals, I suppose.
Well, and that's my thing is like, you're a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor a long, long, long time ago for a very, very short time in the military.
Me too.
But your job as a prosecutor is to protect the record, not get everything that you want. I mean, I've had good prosecutors say, Judge, you can't do that. No matter how much I would like you to do that, Judge, you can't do that. And that's what I'm sort of surprised as to why are the prosecutors going along with this? Because, we've both done trials in small towns, and every time I do a trial in a small town, I get hometown like you would not believe. They don't like, those big city attorneys coming into town. And the thing is, I mean, all the rules apply the same way.
Right.
And I had a case once where I'm my expert witness is on the stand and I'm just, hammering away. And the DA gets up and says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is not within the expert's report. My expert's report is like 7-8 pages, but he referenced all the exhibits, in an appendix. And the prosecutor got up and said in open court, Your Honor, I only read the 7 pages because that's what was in the report. And I literally, I was so in shock. I said, Your Honor, if the prosecution had sent me something and I only read 7 pages of it, I would be contacting my malpractice carrier right now. Right. Needless to say, he didn't like that because it's in front of a jury. But I was like, are you kidding me? But it was the whole, and the judge was like, well, now, Mr. Reich, we don't need to start, slinging words there. We can just, let's resolve this amicably, because everything is a go along, get along attitude.
Right.
And it, like, we're in litigation. It doesn't have to go along, get along. It's called battle. Like, there's going to be a winner and there's
Right.
going to be a loser. And both sides have to do everything within the rules to win. And I just don't get it.
Well, it's definitely a small town. It's definitely a culture where they look out for one another. It's definitely, it definitely goes well beyond the case. And, unfortunately, I think we're really at the point of asking the question, can these people get a fair trial with this prosecutor and this judge?
Let me ask you
I
this.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I know that the Judge Boyce is assigned to that particular county. I'm assuming he rides the circuit, right? He's got a couple of St. Mary's and he's in
Right.
Rexburg, and he's got his little docket and he travels around. How many other judges sit on the district court bench down there that, frankly, have more experience, if that could be like, oh, you're so important to Judge Boyce. We're going to get you, something else, work on.
I don't know that. I don't know how many judges there are in that judicial district.
Okay.
I know that there's one more because he's the administrative judge.
Okay.
But I don't know how many are riding I think that district has 3 or 4 counties. So
yeah. So those judges spend more time on the road,
yeah,
going back and forth to all the jurisdictions, and they got set days and whatever. But, most death penalty judges, that becomes their full-time job. I've seen when we had the case down there in Aurora for the Aurora Theater shooter case, the Batman one.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Samore, who's now in the Colorado Supreme Court, it was like his full-time job. I mean, it was like, this is what we're going to do, because the motions just kept coming. And it was all kinds of motions practice that I've seen little to nothing of in this particular case. I mean, I know we saw Archibald's motion saying, hey, it's unconstitutional to not let people who object to the death penalty sit on the jury panel. But that's going to be, denied. But that's kind of the motions practice that the death penalty stuff gets into.
Right. Right. And we haven't seen any of that yet.
I haven't seen a single thing. So,
So yeah, I don't really know what it is about this case that has sort of been a magnet for all of this stuff that's just not quite right. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I'm just surprised. And I know the media said, don't take the video away. And the judge said the media did nothing wrong. The media was following all the rules. But since now both sides don't want it, then I'm just not going to do it. I really wish, those newspapers and what have you pushed much earlier on. But I guess that's just water under the bridge at this point, because I couldn't believe that the whole judge's order has no appellate review whatsoever.
Yeah, not in Idaho. I think it's interesting, though. He did mention in this hearing, talking about the continuance, that he's been coordinating and had a lot of conversation with Ada County, which is the court in Boise. He said before he granted the continuance motion, he wanted to talk to the folks in Boise and find out what the possibility was of setting the trial out, and what the possibility is of a new date. So, but I think what was interesting is I don't think that he really understands the import of of what's coming in Ada County when the trial starts. I mean, I don't think he really has wrapped his head around how many people are going to be there and how much media is going to be there. The other thing is, and I've talked to several of the family members, there are family members that are feeling that this really disenfranchises them because they can't take 3 months off from work and go to the trial. So not being able to see it streamed is a hardship for the victims' families. And some of the family members who are relatives of Kay and Larry Woodcocks are older and not in great health, and traveling to Boise for 3 months is just not in the cards. So I'm hoping that the families will express to Judge Boyce their continued concern about access. And I'm hoping that once Judge Boyce has the opportunity to talk to Ada County, he's going to realize what a problem no cameras in the courtroom could cause. I mean, one of my questions is in a lot of the bigger cases we've seen, Casey Anthony, Jodi Arias, those big cases, what happens is there's always too much press to get into the courtroom. And so they set up an overflow room for the press.
Yeah.
That's going to have a closed circuit feed. And if they put a closed circuit feed in there, what's to stop them from just live streaming that? So,
yeah. And if you're going to stream it for the extra courtroom, why not just let the world see it?
Right.
Like I said, this judge is not, I mean, there's some judges that write really well and they write great orders and you completely understand what they did, why they did it under the law. But this judge, I'm not criticizing, but it just, he's struggling to convince me that he's making the right decisions because of, one, the secrecy, and two, his orders are just not that well written, in my humble opinion, to explain why this is necessary.
I think he's just completely out of his depth.
Yeah. I mean, if he's doing county court or municipal court cases, and I looked at his background a while ago, I mean, I think he kind of did a hodgepodge, kind of a general practice before he hit the bench. To suddenly be thrown into a death penalty case, kind of as your first case. Normally, you would think somebody up at the Supreme Court would say, hey, we got some powers here. Why don't we move some people around and put an experienced judge on this case? Not to say he's not qualified, but maybe next time around. I just don't get it. But
one thing about Idaho law is that if a judge orders a change of venue, the judge can opt to stay with the case or can say, I'd rather have a judge from the receiving jurisdiction take over the case.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were very hopeful that he was going to suck it up and not let his ego get in the way and actually defer the case to somebody with more experience. But that didn't.
Yeah. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. He's turning into the Judge Ito of Rexburg County. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I get it's a death penalty case. It's going to take a couple of years from start to finish. I just feel like we haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah, we're not we're just still in the starting blocks. Yeah.
So the judge also did not stay the case as it relates to Chad Daybell.
Right.
As the prosecution had requested. And they said, well, Judge, they're joined. You've already joined them. You got mental health issues. Just stay the case. No harm, no foul. I think the judge made the right decision on that because you don't know how long it's going to be for Lori Vallow to become competent again. It could, she starts taking her meds again and everything's great. Well, what happens if she stops taking them because she doesn't like what she hears in court or whatever, or she starts feeling better, so she stops taking the medication, now realizing the reason she feels better is because she's on the medication, so you get in this whole little cycle. The case has got to move forward. So I think the judge made the right decision on that, but he needs to move this thing along.
Well, I think he made the right decision on it too, but frankly, I don't think that there was any legal justification for the state asking to stay Chad's case. I don't think he had the power to do it.
Yeah.
So,
and I was trying to think of a case where, I mean, you have co-defendant. Let's say one co-defendant is, in custody. The other guy skips bond. The case will go on. I've seen a multi-co-defendant cases in a federal case that there's some argument that it really doesn't begin until the last co-conspirator comes in and appears before the court. But they're not, if that guy is on the lam for 10 years, they're not going to say, oh, we're not going to try you for 10 years. It's just not going to happen.
right.
So once again, going back to the prosecutor has a job of protecting the record. I do not understand why they're making these requests like it's no big deal. And when you read their briefs, maybe there's just not that much Idaho law, but they cite to Ninth Circuit case law on most of these issues, which I don't get. As well as I do, that's persuasive authority. And usually
Right.
judges don't look at it that persuasively at all.
No.
So, if the judge was in the Ninth Circuit on the U.S. District Court, he'd say, oh, I got to listen to the Ninth Circuit. This is what they tell me. I got to follow that precedent, and that is the Supreme Court. But they'd be like, I don't care if you're citing Idaho or the Fifth Circuit. Nobody cares.
Right.
It's just, a lot of it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, a lot of it doesn't necessarily make sense to me either. I do think that on that particular issue of staying the case, I don't think there was a lot of case law, which is why they were forced to dig into the Ninth Circuit, which is always a good indication that probably the judge doesn't have any authority to do it anyway. So,
because this isn't the first time it's
mean,
ever come up. I mean, let's get serious.
John Pryor scored a couple. I think the thing that was interesting was that the prosecutors only filed that motion to stay the case the day before that hearing. And John Pryor hadn't had any opportunity to respond to it. And he was not happy about that. That was when the issue of let's have some motion deadlines came up for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the judge was right on that. I question, the prosecution is so intent on trying this case, trying them together. But I'm not entirely sure they get there. I think that John Pryor's arguments in his motion were pretty persuasive. And then we have the unknown quantity of how long Lori is going to be incompetent again.
Yeah, and I don't think they can wait on that.
I don't think they can either.
Even if she's restored to competency, who's to say the morning of trial she could be, Judge, I have a good faith basis that I need to file a motion to address her competency. I mean, I think they just need to get used to the reality that they're going to do this once, and it's probably going to be with Chad Daybell, and they may have to do it again twice for Lori Vallow. And that's just the way it is. Just face the reality, quit dealing with it. I mean, I don't know if you saw my video, but everything they always say is it's really expensive. And Judge, if you're going to grant that severance, can you do it in October so that we can spread this out over 2 fiscal years?
Yeah, really?
Who says that? Yeah. Who says that in a motion? Judge, is real expensive.
Right.
Justice is expensive. Go back to your county commissioners, get the money. They have the money. They'll find the money. Go try this case. Move it on. It just seems like this. Maybe I don't want to throw stones, but it seems like they're scared to go try the case. I don't get it.
I think that's possible. And yet, if you recall, early on in the case, Lindsay Blake, who is the Fremont County prosecutor, had not yet been elected, and there was a prior elected DA. she decided not to run again because she had some health issues and had supported her deputy running. Then Lindsay Blake came back. She was a hometown girl, grew up in St. Anthony, and so she ran and won. But her predecessor was originally in charge of the investigation of Tammy Daybell's death. At the time, the children's bodies had not been found yet, so that was not a Fremont County case. But Tammy Daybell's death was a Fremont County case because it happened at Chad Daybell's home, which is about 100 yards over the border or the boundary.
The county line, yeah.
Right. So that prosecutor said from the beginning, I do not have the resources to deal with this very complex case. And she turned it over to the state AG, to the state attorney general. And the state attorney general had the case until Lindsay Blake was elected. And then she asked the AG for the case back. Now, see, I don't know why in two tiny little rural jurisdictions, they didn't all agree. These cases have got to go to the state AG. They have the resources, they have the money, they have the experienced attorneys to take care and prosecute this case.
Suddenly you get the pot of money that the attorney general gets.
Right.
And we have something similar where rural communities, they can ask the attorney general for help on bigger cases. I've seen it. I've had cases where that's taken place. Usually it was smaller communities, but it was a big case and they frankly just don't have the resources to do it. Right. And they pick up the phone and nobody looked negatively upon anybody. It was just like, we're equals here. You guys do this part of the case, but it was a funding thing and they did it. Like I said, it wasn't a concession like, oh, we're just a bunch of country hayseeds and we can't get this correct at all. No, it's not the case at all. Some of the finest attorneys I've ever seen have been, rural attorneys out there. And like I said, I just don't understand what the big, why did she want it back? I mean, let the AG's office handle this. They're gonna rue the day that they said, oh, we're gonna keep this and prosecute it.
Yeah, I don't really know why she wanted it back. I mean, I know that Rob Wood is very invested in the case. I know that he's very invested in finding justice. He's gotten to know the Woodcocks very well, and I think he's, like most prosecutors, made some commitments that, we're going to find these people and prosecute them. I don't know whether that has anything to do with his continued decision, but I mean, it certainly is a bit of hubris to say my little bitty town who has zero budget for this is going to hold on to this case when somebody else could probably do the job better.
Yeah. It goes back to that rule. There's two types of people in the world, those that are humble and those that are about to be. And it's true. It's never been wrong. It's part of my 12 undeniable truths.
That's
about
right.
Life from a criminal defense attorney. And that one has never, ever, ever been wrong. And I get it. The emotion, the passion of it. But if your job is to do justice, sometimes you got to say, I need to send you off to somebody that frankly has done this before,
Right.
Our attorney general used to, before we got rid of the death penalty here, they used to have what they referred to as the death squad, where that was their job to go prosecute death penalty cases. And, that was their job. They had like 5 cases going on at any given time, and that was it.
Right.
So anyway, I don't know. So what's next? You got a channel. You're coming on Friday. You're going to be on, once again, plug your channel so that everybody that's watching is already in the comments below, I guess. Or what's what I'm looking for? Yeah. Frank, the link's below. Frank's already put it there that
perfect. It is called Children of Darkness and Light. That's the name of my book. And what's next is to keep researching, keep attending hearings, keep pushing to get files unsealed, and hopefully write the damn book if we ever get to trial.
I know, because I'm looking for the book, the big, what do they have when books come out, right? A big book
Oh,
signing
yeah.
or
Big
something.
book launch. Yeah.
And then, you'll be able to spend all those royalty checks and
Maybe.
it'll be good. It'll be really good.
Hope so.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, we hit that hour mark and it's time to go. But I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. And I mean, I'm a person, I email you or call you and say, hey, can you talk?
Yeah.
What's exactly what's going on? Because I know you're going to be there. So it's
Yeah.
you're a great source of information. And like I said, you're my hero. Telling the judge, you
Thank
can't
you.
do that. Because that's what lawyers do, right?
Right.
And I love it. Judge, you can't do that. No disrespect, but you can't do that, Judge.
Right.
And get yourself out of this pickle. So
Right.
it's good. So anyway, you're my hero. Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
And
thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'll try to tune in on Friday night. I have a very, very busy schedule. I'm joking. The other night it was Sunday, and I was like, "Is it only 7:30? Why am I ready for bed?" Like, I'm tired. So, anyway, all right, Hellis, thank you for joining us. I'll be in touch with you throughout the week, and everybody go check out our show Friday night. What time is it? Go out.
It goes out at 6 Pacific. That's 7 Mountain. I think I may have misspoken earlier.
6
Pacific.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody go check it out. All right. Thanks, Lori.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. That was our live for this evening. If you have not become a Patreon member, now would be a good time to do that, because we're going to roll into our Patreon show in just a couple of minutes. I have to make a phone call because the practice of law never rests, and got to call somebody back. So I'll do that. And as soon as I get done with that call, we'll go do our Patreon show. So please join us. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk.